You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Darryl Sanders.
And we are your hosts for the show. And we're actually live on a Sunday, like what we said we were going to do. It's wonderful.
And on time.
And on time. That's the trifecta right there. And if you guys have noticed, we already have tomorrow's episode. Links up there. It's already ready to go. So we're really on top of things. Hopefully we can keep this going a little bit. I mean, I know this time of year there's going to be a couple of things that might affect things. But for the most part, we should be okay. I don't know. Seems like we were just on Monday, but it seems like it's been a minute or something. I don't know. Maybe it's maybe it's just me. But
no.
But we're tonight we're actually talking about something that's interesting. Of course, before we do that, obviously Ted is with us. As you can see, he's looking very much forward to tonight. Wants us to have a fun time. And then, of course, David's with us, giving us the usual hello, gentlemen, it's Star Wars Day greeting. 1 of 2, David, 1 of 2. Tomorrow's Star Wars Day, too. But in a way, this is probably even more Star Wars than a lot, because it's funny, there has been a lot of news and stuff that's come down from D23. I don't know if you've seen a lot of that. They released not too long ago a Skeleton Crew trailer, actually, which I thought about reacting to. They apparently there was like a sizzle reel for the Mandalorian and Grogu movie that was shown at this thing.
About that. I just heard about that.
Yeah. I would love to see that, because I would really love to see the look that this movie is going to have and compare it to how the television show looks.
Mm-hmm.
What else was mentioned? There was like a couple other things that were actually noteworthy. Like there was a lot of Star Wars news that came off. But in typical head-to-head fashion, we're talking about none of that. Talking about none of that. Actually, well, in a way, because I'm not sure. Did this interview actually that Ahmed Best did it happen at D23, or was that like some separate?
I think it was before. Separate.
Okay. Yeah. So he was going on about how everybody is misunderstanding the Force, and George Lucas is getting older, and he really wants people to really understand, which you can't blame the guy, right? Because with the way that Disney has been, I mean, he has to just be going, all right, at some point, maybe I got to put out a book or something, or, something to essentially set the record straight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that, we've all, I would say we all, I'll even just say myself.
Yeah, you should say yourself on this one, because I've always felt the way. And honestly, it's basically obvious when you just watch the original trilogy.
Well, it's not even the real original trilogy that really explained it for me. Honestly, for me, it was the prequels. Like when I think back,
yes,
the prequel actually really truly defines it, and quite honestly, see, and that's why I think when you have Disney, when they took over and they did the sequel trilogy, they kind of screwed it up, because you hear the whole when darkness rises, light rises to meet it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, because when you think of balance, you think of scales, right? You think of something has to be the same weight on one side as it is on the other, and so you're thinking that requires two sides, and that's eventually kind of how I thought that, okay, this is how the Force works, because there's always a light in the dark, so it makes sense. It's almost like the old Chinese yin and yang philosophy, right? But according to Ahmed Best and now George Lucas, definitively now he's said no, that's not the case. That the Force essentially is.
You got to use the line.
What? Which one?
Well, the one where, we get to say, essentially, George was saying, no, that's not how the Force works.
Oh, no.
Come on, there's only like a handful of times you can actually use
true. That is very true.
I mean, this is dying for this one.
But yes, that's not how the force works. And definitively, the force is balanced when it's in the light. The light side is perfectly balanced. It only goes out of balance when the dark side comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a definitive answer from the creator himself, George Lucas. So whatever else anybody else says, it's completely irrelevant because the creator said it. And like I said, what made it, when I read the article and I began to think back, and this is what made it more real for me. It wasn't, and you could give me the original trilogy because I would love to hear that from the original trilogy why you feel that way. Because I don't think it was necessarily that clear in the original, but in the prequels, the line where Palpatine, we always quote, he said, the dark side of the force is a path to ability that some consider to be unnatural. So if it's unnatural, that means that that's not its design purpose. It's not it's corrupted. So that in and of itself tells you that it's, I guess you would say out of balance.
Well, you're
And
talking about
then
a specific line or lines,
mhm,
which you're right. From the prequel, definitely. I mean, I didn't even really think about it, but I mean, the prequel's like full of stuff that
yeah,
supports that, which is obvious because he's the one that made those, right? But
right, exactly. And that's exactly, he's the one who wrote Revenge of the Sith.
yep. But the thing that I was thinking in terms of the original trilogy, there's the closest that you can come really to actual lines that would support it would just be Obi-Wan's explanation and talking about how the dark side is actually corrupting and all that stuff, where it's not two sides of the same coin really. It's really more of a corruption. You put dye in clear water and it taints the water. And that's really what the dark side more or less does. And it's more or less implied throughout the original trilogy. So it's more conceptual in the original trilogy, that especially when you go back in light of Lucas's comments, you can go, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." Because again, it's broad strokes. But what you're talking about though, which 100% correct, is now he starts to get a little bit more literal, and you get a
Hmm.
little bit more in the narrative, and it's more exposition in the prequels.
Yeah.
And you're also right in the sense of, yeah, that Disney basically started first screwing with that even as early as the sequel trilogy.
Yeah. And to couple that with, when we start hearing about, like, when we talked about the kyber crystals, you know, um, them bleeding, the crystals. Once again, the force is in the crystals, which is why, when you go find your, crystal, it kind of calls out to you, and then, you bond with it. And that's why, your lightsaber is pretty much an attachment to you, or an extension, or not attachment, an extension of yourself. Right. So when you turn to the dark side and you bleed the crystal red, once again, you're corrupting something that was already, because if you notice, like, all Sith colors are red. There's no uniqueness or individuality to it. When you get a kyber crystal, all right, Luke got his, it was green, for its own reason. Obi-Wan's was blue for its own reason. Mace was purple because of his ability to be able to tap into the light and the dark. And that's why it became purple. At least that's the canon explanation of it.
Yeah.
Now, so when you look at all Sith Lords, though, all Sith Lords colors are red because it's not a individual. It's, you have one single solitary purpose, and that's just darkness.
Right.
Whereas in light, you have and that's the thing that a lot of people in the dark side often feel like you don't have freedom being a Jedi, because you have all these rules that confine you and constrict you. Oh, you can't love, and you can't do these things, and you can only use the force for defense, never for attack, and all that type of stuff. to a lot of people, it seems like, okay, well, that's really restrictive. And to a certain degree, I can understand why they would say that. But then on the other side of it, it's like, there's a lot of freedom in, because when you have these boundaries, it's like, okay, well, I can do a lot of things. Because if we look at the Jedi, especially now in the High Republic era, I mean, like we're seeing all tons of stuff that the Jedi are able to do. You got
Hmm.
force healers, you got people who can see into the future, you got all these different types of abilities and things that allow you to kind of almost in some ways be a specialist in a way, if you want to call it that. Where now it's like, all right, that's a lot of freedom because you can kind of use the force to um look into the like I said, look into the future. You could create different types of weapons. We saw the light whip and all these different types of stuff where the dark side, yeah, you can just kind of do whatever you want. But the only part about the bad part about that is that it just leads you down to one single direction, and that's
Hmm.
completely, destroying yourself. Where you don't have that freedom because you don't have the freedom to, unless you just abandon it. You only have one path. Whereas when you're on the light side, you have multiple directions in which you can go to. So I think that's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, and it's also fascinating that Ahmed Best is the one that's actually bringing this to us. It's like I remember when I first saw this whole article, I'm like, all right, well, that's a unique little thing. Because I mean,
That's it's because he doesn't want to be hated anymore.
well, well, and in his defense, it's not just Jar Jar. He is the name of
Well,
that
he is
Jedi.
Kellen. Is it
Kellen.
Kellen?
Yeah,
Ec- Uh,
it's like a one syllable last name. Like,
it's like Kellen Esker,
yeah, or
something like that.
I don't know.
I
I'm
think I
sure
have it right here.
somebody
Let
will.
me.
Yeah, look it up. I mean, I'm sure somebody's gonna chat it in like seconds anyway. But yeah, and it's such an easy name to basically remember, and I never remember the stupid thing ever.
Well, it's because we only saw him play that character one
Well, yeah,
time,
it was one
like 2
time, and I think
seconds.
we did. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is a good point. He made one appearance. I
Yeah,
don't
he was in
even.
Jar Jar for like 3 movies.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, and that was like what 25 years ago or something like that. So I mean, he's been Jar Jar for a long time.
Kelleran Beck,
Kelleran Beck. Uh,
BEQ.
yep, that was it. So, I mean, I knew it was like some. It wasn't like it was a tough name to remember. David said, "Leave it to Darryl to explain darkness is black and white and explain the light side of the Force is gray." Well, that's what's interesting too, because I was going to bring this up. Is the fact that Filoni, even before the sequel trilogy, started playing with the idea with the whole Bendu and all that stuff. And then, of course, you had like the Gray Jedi. And again, I mean, none of that's affected really because all that is you're just straddling the path between light and dark. I mean, it's not
Hmm. Which David
necessarily,
laments, of course.
of course. But I mean, it is interesting in light of all that, though, that in a way you can. It's like a lot of people might look at this going, "Oh, great, Disney screwed it up and everything," but there's still room to actually fix what is canon, particularly with the Acolyte, where you have, those witches and things like that. Because if you're looking at the Force in totality, in perfect balance is the light, and of course the dark side is what taints it. Which, fortunately, whether people are conscious of it or it's a subconscious thing, that was implied in the original trilogy heavily, and then, of course, really explained in the prequels. It would be fairly easy to go pretty much right that ship. I mean, first of all, people are trying to move past the sequel trilogy anyway. It's.
That's true.
And I mean, and the bleeding the crystal thing, that basically fits. Because again, it's a corruption, like you said, of something pure. It's kind of like Jedi get all these colors. It's like, well, I wonder what mine's going to be. Yours is going to be red, like the other 1,000 Sith Lords before you, right? Because
Exactly.
Basically, you're taking whatever color it would have been, you're just bleeding it, so it's going to be red. But it's going to be interesting, though, to see, first of all, what happens in light of this, because this article is actually getting a lot of traction from a lot of different news sources.
Hmm.
And one of the things that Kathleen Kennedy and the rest of Lucasfilm are going to have an issue with is, as long as George Lucas is still alive, whenever he comments on any of this stuff, it's almost like it instantly puts them in their place and mildly
Hmm.
undoes anything that they said, because of course everybody's going to look at him like, hey, he's the guy that came up with this stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you come up with. You're basically playing in his sandbox.
Yeah. He's giving you the sandbox to which you can play in now. Like I provided the sandbox for you,
Right.
and that's why I think it's really going to be, really interesting in this whole James Mangold movie, because I think that's what it really needs to be defined. I mean, and like I say, I'm not saying it wasn't already defined, but even, I guess, reimagined, if I can put it that way. Um, this whole Dawn of the Jedi, that's what we're calling it right now because it doesn't have an official title. However, that particular film, and they're actually kind of going back to the very beginnings of it. I think that's where things kind of need to be kind of clarified in that. And I don't know if that's just going to be a one-off movie or that ends up being a trilogy. I mean, a trilogy wouldn't be bad, honestly, in that time period.
Yeah.
However, I think that's where it needs to be really truly like explained, as far as, because you're really good. That's the perfect space to really explain the force in all its different properties. I just put it that way.
Well, and it also depends on what angle he comes from. Now, of course, like you said, and I think that we basically read at some point that it is going to be, hey, here's how the first Jedi became a Jedi and discovered the Force and all that stuff. And you're right. I mean, if they go down that path, they almost absolutely have to start cementing some of this stuff into the canon, at least the current canon. Um, if they go a little bit more of the origin of the Jedi and Sith and lean a little bit towards that Sith war, they could do that. But like you said, that could also be a second or third movie in a trilogy too.
Hmm.
So there is room for that. There was something, that was another thing that I meant to bring up at the beginning too. There was another, out of nowhere, I forgot who it was. Some filmmaker that is now making a Star Wars film. Like they just announced this, like out of nowhere. And his stipulation for making it is that it can't be tied to, any other era or characters or something like that. And I think it was announced. It had to have been announced at D23, but I forgot who it was. Because it was something that I read in passing, before just like doing a bunch of stuff today, and I'm like, okay, we have the show tonight, and I remember I was just scrolling through some news or whatever, and I happened to see that pop up. Like I said, there was a lot of stuff that came out of this D23 thing that we have our shows locked in already for today and tomorrow, obviously, but
Hmm.
next week maybe we can backtrack and cover some of the stuff that was announced, because
I'm sure there will be more information because of that, so we have more to actually give out. So
well,
that's
maybe, don't forget, it might have even been at D23 where they announced the Lando series and then just disappeared, and then it reappeared briefly again, and
well. I'm just
then
talking about what they just announced, so we have
hmm,
more context of what they've already kind of just
right,
talked
like
about,
a
like
list or
specific.
something, like here's everything that was announced type of deal. Yeah,
Not
that's
only that, but
possible.
there might be more exposition on what that means. So
Yeah, a little context.
now that they've announced it. But yeah, I mean, what do you think? Um, why do you think they decided to go with the whole, when darkness rises, light rises to meet it? Because you still have some of the people like Filoni, who was there, who's, like we always say, is the heir apparent to Lucas. So surely he knows. Pablo Hidalgo is still part of Disney. So why do you think they actually let that go?
Well, because I don't think they were super involved in it. Remember, at the time that the sequels came out, Filoni was still really rooted in the whole animation thing.
Yeah, true.
Sure, he had the knowledge, but he was the animation guy. He wasn't even the creative director yet. J.J. Abrams was a guy who was the man for the sequel trilogy. And
Yeah.
much like with Star Trek, he took some of the stuff and morphed it and made sense to his own story. And unfortunately, because obviously not too many people were, I don't know if it was a consultation thing, because even somebody like Pablo, right? He would end up chiming in on certain things, but there's a lot of things that he wasn't even really told about. Because if you remember, the criticism that we always have is that the sequel trilogy was never really planned.
Yeah, true.
The whole story was never outlined. It was never really solidified. It was like each director could just basically add on to the previous film and go any direction they wanted. And I can understand an appeal to that, right? Like, I could see where that type of filmmaking might appeal to certain filmmakers and even audience members. Not Star Wars, though. Especially an anticipated trilogy like the sequel trilogy that everybody's been waiting like 30 years for. That you play safe. You don't try to get all creative with that. You make a Star Wars trilogy. Not derivative, of course, but you make
Right.
something. So, I mean, I think what ended up happening was they just got wrapped up in their own, and I don't, they were thinking in terms of, look, this is Disney's now. It no longer belongs to Lucas. We're going to do our own things, because don't forget, they rejected his treatments. When Lucas sold this thing, he was under the impression that, he was going to have his treatments turned into episodes 7, 8, and 9.
Mm-hmm.
And he was ready to consult and slowly pass the baton, so to speak. But that didn't end up happening. They basically just almost right in front of him, just ripping up the treatments and be like, yeah, you know what? We're going to go our own way. And that's what sort of soured him on Star Wars, where he started calling, like, Disney like white slavers and, pretty much just talking about how, well, it's not mine anymore. And, he almost had like a little bit of a tantrum moment. But that's why, because don't forget, he was ready to make episodes 7, 8, and 9 himself. And then he decided to do that, and he thought, okay, cool. Disney has the capital, they got the talent, they got a lot of people on board. I'll just hand this project off to them, and they'll just pick it up and, run with it, and then it'll probably be cool. And then they didn't. They basically just more or less spit in his face and said, nope, it's ours now. We're going to do what we want. And so I think what they were trying to do, because if you listen to a lot of Kathleen Kennedy interviews, particularly when all the Disney Plus shows came out, she kept saying things like, well, we're trying to get further from the vision. We're trying to expand it beyond Lucas. She's using all this stuff, which is basically like, no, we're pretty much just doing our own thing.
Yeah, I mean, once again, it just shows, and I'm one of those type of people who really believe that everything has a purpose, right? And the more you go away from the purpose of something, it falls, because that's done. It's designed intent, and I think that's the problem with Kathleen Kennedy. With Disney, is that she's trying to, the force is female, this force is this. Okay, you're trying to do you're trying to make Star Wars something that it wasn't created for, and you're wondering why you're having all these problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's because you're trying to reinvent something that's already designed, and that's it just further shows, when you have people like I said, Dave Filoni, who is trying to bring it and keep it more true to what George had. Well, this is why the Mandalorian was so successful, because he kept the premise and he kept the principles of what Star Wars actually is. And for the most part, that's why people really enjoyed it. Man. Now, granted, Ahsoka, eh, it's not the fact that he didn't keep the principles; it's just the acting and everything else was just terrible. That's just
Yeah,
because
yeah.
he's not good at live action directing yet. That's just, just a skill set he just has to keep working at. But the principles of it all is there, though.
Right, and I mean, I think a lot of cases too, what ends up happening is you get a situation where you have these people who are a little bit too close to it sometimes, so they think that there's these amazing ideas that they have, and they're really close to the project, and they don't understand, like you said, that they're actually getting away from what this is. This isn't like a normal franchise. You can't treat it like a normal franchise. It's different, and it was also the first of its kind, really. I mean, you can go into templates like even the very thing that Lucas tried to buy, Flash Gordon. It had a similar type of a thing, but you bring up the Mandalorian, you can also say Rogue One.
Yeah.
Rogue One was another one, which is you can always tell the stuff that's close to Star Wars because those are the sets that Lucas will visit and actually give ideas and all that stuff. Solo: A Star Wars Story being another one. You can always tell the projects that are close to his vision because those are the sets that he'll visit. Those are the ideas. He'll start giving them maybe some ideas or clarifying stuff or there's some goodwill. But yeah, I agree. I think that basically they're just trying to morph this thing into something. And then what makes it even worse is when it blows up in their face, these same people just turn it on the fans and go, well, you guys are just haters
toxic.
and toxic. And yeah, and it's like, not every criticism is based on toxicity or hatred. And I always hate that. Because you'll see that.
Like if you don't like something, oh, you're a hater. It's like,
yeah.
Okay, if this guy don't like something, I'm a hater. Like, I'm not. Yeah. It's this world.
And that's it. And it has been that way for a while, and it's just gotten really bad within the last year or so, I noticed. But that mentality has been slowly growing over the last 5 or so years to where, yeah, things are instantly, if you have a problem with anything, then it's got to be based on some other thing. It's never just on the merit of whatever, the project or, whatever it is you're criticizing. It's just like, oh, you just, you're just toxic and you just hate. And it's like, no, sometimes things really do suck,
yeah, some things just are bad products, and just because you're affectionate towards it doesn't change the fact that it's still a bad product. It is what it is. Truth is truth, no matter how you look at it. The truth can stand alone, and the truth is a lot of these projects suck. So,
well, and that's it too. And it's just like, it's like, no, I don't hate it because it has a female lead. I hate it because it's poorly written and poorly executed.
Absolutely.
And I'm not just the typical male Star Wars fan that's hating on anything female. It's like, no, I mean,
exactly.
And then of course, with these people who have the keys to the company, who supposedly know their own material, then you have to go and turn around and show how, since the very first film came out in 1977, you've had a plethora of strong female lead characters throughout the entire franchise and all mediums that everybody loved. Nobody's hating on Asajj Ventress.
Or Princess Leia.
Or Leia.
Exactly.
Or Padme or Sloane or any of these other kids, like new and old. It's like there have been tons of strong female
Mary
characters.
Jade.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And I mean, the thing is it always comes down to it's that, or, if you hate the Acolyte, then suddenly you hate the LGBTQ community and you're a bigot, or, you're a racist or whatever. It's like, no. None of that. Just think it was a poorly written show. You can actually think that and not have anything tied to that. And until Lucasfilm lets that kind of thinking go, unfortunately, I think you're going to see a really just continue decline in the quality of some of this stuff. Like, and again, I mean, I wish I remember the guy's name, but whoever was announced to have a Star Wars film, it's like, well, where did this guy come from? We had the schedule where, is it almost like, okay, the other ones aren't working. We have to get something out by 2026. How about this guy? I mean, it just, or was this always part of the thing? Is his movie going to come out after these initial, like we never, it's kind of like what you were talking about, which maybe it's good that we didn't do the show this weekend because maybe we just don't have enough context because the whole thing was still going on, right? Maybe after the dust settles and.
Quite frankly, to be it's got to be hard to be a filmmaker right now, and you get the call like, "Hey, we want you to do a Star Wars movie."
That's why this guy. That's why this guy had stipulations.
It used to be everyone's. Well, it used to be every probably filmmaker's dream to be able to do that. Like, dude, like I get to do work on, not even just be like direct one, just maybe be a part of it. Let me be an assistant director or the key grip on one of these stupid things. But to now, we've got Star Wars has unfortunately unraveled to the point where I think you have a lot of directors who are truly gun shy about trying to direct this stuff because it's like, you know what? Just seeing all the visceral hate that's going on. I mean, you want to talk about the dark side of the force. You got a lot of people, a lot of fans have a lot of anger and hate towards stuff because it's their beloved franchises, going down the toilet and at an exceedingly fast rate. And I think, Disney is probably having to replace directors because it's like, oh, I got another project I think I need to do, or, they're trying to find other ways out of it or something, or they're trying to just grab some new guy who just, oh, okay, well, he's different. Let's get him. And it's like, okay, stop just trying to be different. Like it's one of those things where I hate when people, and I've told you this a number of times, Eric, when we worked at the school. Like I hate when parents try to name their kids or give their kids some weird spelling to their name because if I spell their name Jasmine completely different from the traditional spelling, it's going to automatically make my child special and different. And it's like, no, they're going to be special and different because the other 12 million Jasmines don't have you and your partner's DNA. That's what makes them special. It's not the spelling of their name. It's the fact that you two got together and made a good, little cocktail of
you spit
DNA
this,
and
you spit out this Jasmine. Yeah, this is the Jasmine
exactly.
You all spit out, and that's what makes her unique.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah.
And that's
crazy.
the thing with Disney. I think that's just the problem is that they're trying too much to be. They're trying too hard to be different and unique. And it's like Star Wars is already different and unique. That's the beautiful part about it. That's why we loved it.
It's that. It's any of the social agendas. We want to be inclusive. We want to be, whatever buzzword they think of. It's like they're not putting story first anymore. They're putting message first. Now there is some hope though, because on the Marvel side of things, Feige or no,
Kevin Feige.
No, it might have been DC. I thought it was Marvel because I remember I hope Lucasfilm does it. Yeah, I think it was Marvel. Yeah, Feige went in and fired all the producers that he felt like had an agenda. Like just straight up, you seem like, you're an ultra feminist. You're gone. And, there's still obviously projects that were made under that whole mentality. So, it might not take effect right away. But it's a really good sign, especially a studio as big as that one, especially when they're not just of their own, they're under Disney. But there's even been like some rumblings at Disney that finally Disney's lost enough money that people are understanding that people don't want this. You're cramming this down our throats, and it's really only representing like a single digit percentage of the population. So what's going on? Why are you putting message over story? And they're doing that. And to that end, David has this question. You all think the backstabbing of Lucas has resulted in a problem of identity?
What do you mean by the backstab? Oh, you mean the fact that they went behind his back and didn't make his
Yeah, and I think
original
what he's
treatment?
saying, and of course, I mean, he can chat in if
I think that's, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, David. That's what you're
well,
referring
that
to.
or maybe it's because, they don't necessarily want it being identified as a Lucas property. Never mind the fact that the company's called Lucasfilm, but we'll let that go. Right? But I think what we're trying to do is they're trying to get it away from a George Lucas thing. So whenever you see Star Wars, you don't think of Lucas, you think of whatever. But I mean, the problem is you're always going to think of him.
Well, yeah, it's like saying, like, Star Trek with Gene Roddenberry. It's like
Exactly.
it's synonymous. I think, to your point about identity, David, and I know where you're going, is I think it's just, once again, it's a another version of society trying to, um rear its ugly head, and into something that it has no place, right? This is not where, we've said this, on numerous occasions. This is not the platform for social agendas. It's not a thing for Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ plus. It's not for, the feminist movement. It's not for any other major, agenda. It's an escape. It's for, to get away from that. It's to really, like, okay, you know what? We see enough of that on the news in our everyday lives. For once, we just want to escape. I mean, that's why Eric, and we always say it's science fantasy. Just the mere fact that it's fantasy, it's like, all right, you do have to have some suspension of disbelief. It's supposed to put you in the world where almost, most of this crap doesn't exist. You might have, like, fascism or something like that, but that's an overall thing.
And that's been
But
throughout history. It's like you said. First of
that's
all,
like
it's
a, yeah,
it's a broad stroke
it's
thing. It's
broad. It's a
non-specific.
broad thing.
And it's
Yeah.
also something, it's a concept that's just happened throughout time. So it's not tied to one era. Okay, now here's what David actually meant.
Okay.
When they bought Star Wars, they cut him out. Did that decision result in a struggle of identity for Star Wars? Technically, but it didn't have to. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the idea. If they had handled it the way the expanded universe handled it, everything would have been fine.
It's kind of like a parent that raises a child, and you give your child the basics of, this is how you become a good citizen, a good human being, just being an overall good person. And these are the things that you need to do to foster that. And then the kid grows up and says, you know what? When I get older, I don't want to do any of that. Like, I hated the fact that my mom and my dad made me go do this. I want to go do my own thing. And then they go out and they try to do their own thing, and then they realize, oh crap, mom and dad were right about what they were telling me. And then they eventually have to kind of go back and to their roots and realize, like, okay, and it's because mom and dad have already been there, and they've already fleshed this thing. They've already lived long enough to tell you, look, I know you're gonna want to try this. I know you're gonna want to try this drug or try, all this stuff. And it's like, it's not gonna it's gonna bring you a bunch of problems. Yeah, but everybody else is kind of doing that, and I don't want to be left out. So, you know, let me do it. Okay. And then you realize, oh crap, I got myself in a heap of trouble. Now I need mom and dad to basically bail me out. I need George Lucas to come bail me out. And that's essentially kind of what happened.
Yeah, it's the prodigal son all over again. Basically,
Hmm.
Lucas is waiting for, Disney to stop partying and come home.
Exactly. Which, ironically, to this point, I mean, and I'm glad you brought up the prodigal son, but see, and that's the thing. Like George Lucas even brought in a lot of Christianity into Star
Hmm.
Wars that a lot of people kind of gloss over. I mean, the whole concept of this whole okay, the Force basically gave birth to a child. I mean, for those who are subscribed to the Christian faith, I mean, where have we heard that story before?
Yeah,
you know,
the
it's
allegory is
just
pretty
like,
strong on that one.
yeah, exactly. And the Force is kind of like one of those things where it's kind of like a spirit. It's kind of a ruling guide. It kind of guides your life, and it helps you make decisions and do things like that. Once again, if you subscribe to the Christian faith, you know you kind of get, like you said, the allegory in that, and the dark side. And once again, like even in life, we always say like, okay, there's always choices. God gives us choices to do things. You can follow this path or you can follow that path. Well, we all, and according to George Lucas, of course, we all know, if once again, if you subscribe to the Christian faith, you follow God, then it's like, all right, well, all right, that's a perfectly balanced life. You don't need anything else. But if you choose to go down a darker path, well, yes, you can maybe able to get some things that you want quicker and more from a nefarious, through nefarious means, but it leads you down a dark path that eventually is going to end in damnation. And that's essentially what it is.
And pretty much destroy you even
Yeah.
sometimes in your current life. So I mean,
In your current
and
life.
as
Absolutely.
part of that too, I remember one of the other parts that Ahmed was talking about was how even with the dark side powers, it's like sure, they all know how to use lightning and choking and all that stuff. They choose not to do it because it's quicker and easier.
And it's more aggressive. It's
And it's
not
more aggressive. Yeah, and it would start to maybe
they're
put you on a path that you don't want to be on or shouldn't be on.
yeah, and it's one, it's kind of like we've heard, through different commentaries from people that like people who do drugs, right? Everyone says, "Oh, I just smoke weed," and it's like, well, that's marijuana's the gateway drug. Some people can just stay with marijuana and they never try anything else. Other people like, well, I got this other thing that makes you higher than that. Oh, really? Well, let me try this cocaine. Oh, I got something better than cocaine. Oh, there's heroin. Oh, if you mix cocaine and fentanyl together, man, you'll be really. And you see what I'm saying? Like you keep going down this destructive path that eventually leads you, like you're tearing your body apart by ingesting all these chemicals into your
We've all
body. That
seen people on meth.
that y'all forgot about meth, but yep, that's another one. So again, it's the drug of, and that's why the Jedi are kind of like, look, if you just don't come near this stuff and you just don't even dabble in it, so that way you won't be tempted to go higher, or in some cases deeper into the dark, and that's essentially what's happening.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that that's one of the things that it's really to point out that element of it. I mean, there's just all kinds that if you actually keep that in mind, what Lucas basically said about it, and then rewatch at least the prequels and original trilogy, and maybe even throw in some of the other projects too. You'll see it, and it'll make a lot more sense. And it makes way more sense because this is another problem that Disney has, by the way. They constantly have to explain everything now because everything's so convoluted the way that they've done it. Lucas, when he was painting in broad strokes, he kept it that way on purpose. If you start getting too much in the weeds and in the minutia of things, then you have to start giving people the parameters and the different rules and whatever. And I think that that's where Disney is they're bringing in all these elements, and it's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna bring this in now because this will be different and whatever. And it's like, well, wait a minute, now you gotta explain how that works in canon now.
Now, you at the top of the show, Eric, you brought up a point. Um, you were saying that in the original trilogy, they really talked about, he kind of explained the whole balance of the Force. To me, I really didn't get that. I would love to hear your explanation of like where in that
Well, when you
Because for
take
me, and I go ahead.
well, when you take in totality everything that Obi-Wan said about it, particularly when he first met Luke, then you look at
Mhm.
all the lines, I mean, Yoda's talking about, with the dark side, it's a quicker, easier path. Forever it'll dominate your destiny. If you look, it's always been implied in the original trilogy that the light side was the purity of the Force. Everything was in balance. And then what happens is darkness comes in and it messes everything up. And when you actually stop and think about every line that was said by Obi-Wan when he first met him, and then, of course, when he had to clean it up a little with the certain point of view thing, and then, everything that Yoda was talking about, then you look at how, Vader was trying to get him to his side and everything like that. And, of course, what's he promising? Well, you'll have power. We can actually restore stuff. Because don't forget, one of the things that makes Vader such a tragic figure is when he was Anakin, he really was thinking he was doing the right thing. He's thinking, look,
Mhm.
if somebody like me has all the power, well, then I'll be cool because I'm cool. But what he didn't see was how corrupted he was becoming because of the dark side. And he didn't really understand that, no, dude, you can't wipe out a temple full of younglings. It's not acceptable. And, these other things that you're doing. Because that's what I thought was so cool about the whole Bloodline novel, was that they're bringing up, like, okay, you're the daughter of this dude who's responsible for, like, trillions of deaths. I mean,
Yeah.
when you really stop and think of everything that Vader did from the time he
Well,
became Darth Vader,
well, at
dude,
least he was a part of. Yeah.
or a part of, like, if he didn't directly do it himself, which a lot of times he did because he was the enforcer. He's ordering it done. He's, the guy's responsible for just maybe even quadrillions, because we're talking about the
Planet.
galaxy and
Like, at least,
everything, right?
well, you look at just Alderaan, that just
Yeah, right.
you blew up a
Right.
planet, dude. I mean, an entire. It's like if somebody just wiped the our Earth off the map. Like,
I
it's
know
like how many.
we're all like concerned about like a genocide. Well, okay, this is like so many millions of people or whatever. What if somebody just blew the entire planet up? Like, yep, that
Planet.
was me.
Yep, exactly.
7 billion, buddy.
Yep.
Right? That's true. And that was like what, a half hour into the first movie that we ever saw.
Yeah, but and like I said, he didn't push the button, but he was definitely a part of it, and he didn't give the order, but he didn't stop it either. So I mean, he's
Yeah.
kind of,
Which is what made the redemption part so cool, because that he did. He's looking at like, okay, yeah, maybe I should have done this a little earlier, but he was caught up in the emotion of it being his son and all that stuff. And he's also remembering, he's remembering like what it was that he used to be and why he got into this in the first place. Because as everybody knows, and this is canon, both something that Lucas had just basically said in passing, but they actually cemented it with the new canon stuff, is that, as soon as Vader got in the suit, realized that Palpatine duped him, instantly he regretted his decision. Instantly he hated Palpatine. And it's like, all right,
Mhm.
I'm going to find a way to kill this guy. And again, he was still trying to keep with the noble intentions. Like, okay, we'll rule as father and son. We'll be cool. But, okay, dude, but you can't do what you're doing, though.
Right.
There's that little quick and easy path. It's like, you're trying to, and that's the other thing, is that you get this big corruption of the dark side. And and I think that a lot of times people will look at it as like an A or B thing, but it's almost like A is being corrupted by B kind of a thing. It's like it's not like they're separate. Really, one's just, like I said, you put red dye in water.
Hmm.
The dye is not something like water. Well, I guess if you had enough of it, because it is a liquid, but it's actually spoiling this actually pure cool thing. And there's a lot they could do story-wise. See, this is what irritates me about Disney too. They go chasing down all this messaging and agendas and, I want to be the first, I don't know, like Indian Sith Lord or something. I mean, it's just like they're trying
Yeah.
to do all this stuff, and yet you have all these really cool story concepts that you could be
Yes.
doing that,
And the messages that actually matter.
yeah, there you go. The
Like
timeless
that's
ones.
that yeah, that's what I'm
Like,
saying.
be a
Like
good
these are the
person,
mess
you know?
exactly. Like that's the message. Like who cares if if you're Indian, you're black, you're white, you're German, you're whatever. It's like just be a good human being. That's really the message of it all. It's like that's what George is really trying to say. It's like, look, stop being selfish. Stop thinking about, stop
Yep.
chasing after or don't allow your fears and things to like overshadow the greater good. And that's really the message of Star Wars that keeps getting lost because you keep piling all this, agenda crap on top. And because that's like, that's really what Star Wars was created for. Because remember, it was created for kids.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
if you're raising kids, you're trained, like I said earlier, you're training your kids to be a good person, a good citizen. We want our kids to, grow up, be productive members of society. Hopefully, you're not going around being a mass murderer, anything like that. You just want them to be a productive person in society and make this leave this world a little bit better than where you left it. That's the goal. But of course, there are stumbling blocks in our way as human beings that get in the way of that. And you have to learn understand how to sidestep them and why you should sidestep them, because if you don't, it leads you from being a good person, because now you're slowly, because like I said, Anakin, like you said, Anakin did it for noble reasons. And it's not like it was just I want to be evil all of a sudden. Like, no, it was a slow burn. It was a progressive thing that they saw from the time he was a kid, losing his mother, of being a slave. And then all of a sudden, now his mother's basically been tortured and killed by sand people. He wasn't strong enough to save her. And, he feels guilty for that. And then now his beloved wife that he shouldn't even have technically, but nonetheless, she's here. He keeps seeing visions of her, about to die, and he doesn't understand that it's actually by his hand, literally and figuratively. But you know, and so he's just like, okay, I'm just trying to save the people, but that's the selfishness part, because he feels like he can be the savior of everything, because he realizes, look, I have all this power. I got more power than a little green frog over here that's trying to tell me how to do this stuff. I'm more powerful. I'm more powerful than you, in potential at least.
Yeah, I mean, someday
So
he will be, so.
yeah, he will be. That's what I'm saying, potentially. So it's like, who are you to tell me that I can't save? But see, once again, it's the selfishness that kind of creeps in instead of being selfless. And hey, you know what? If the will of the force is for my wife to die, so be it. And letting that happen might have actually prevented her death. But because he was chasing the the idea that he could save everybody, and even he told Padme, he was like, well, well, somebody should make, everybody should. And she was like, well, who's going to make it? You Weinberg. So he's just like, well, not exactly me, but someone like who? She's like, well, someone wise, and but a wise person would know that, like, hey, I can't make people, you know what I mean? And that just shows the immaturity of him. But like I said, his heart was in the right place. It's just he didn't think everything through, and that's what allowed him to, succumb to his own desires.
Well, and I mean, that's a big part of it too, right? Because a lot of the stuff, if he had just done the right thing, first of all, that's the whole reason why the no attachment rule exists. So you don't get in these conundrums where you're torn between, a person that you love and doing something, say, for the greater good, or just getting too wrapped up in it. And then, of course, the other thing, which, of course, you just pointed out, was the fact that, dude, if you had just been cool and, let things happen, you would have gotten exactly what you wanted. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
Palpatine was manipulating him the whole time, and he had
True.
no chance against that. But
Yeah.
still, if he had remained steadfast, and I mean, to his credit, I'm still shocked. I remember seeing Revenge of the Sith for the first time. And as soon as Palpatine, revealed himself and he ignited his lightsaber and was like, all right, then I'm arresting you. I'm like, wow, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he
was still trying to do the right thing.
Still trying, but the Palpatine knew what carrot to dangle in front of him.
Right, because like 3 minutes later, he's, cutting off Mace Windu's hands.
Because he's like, I need him alive because it's like, I have this secret that if I die, it dies with me. And he's like, well, I can't take that chance. Once again, for going, and my thing is just like, it's not like Palpatine proved anything to him at that point.
No, and the best. I absolutely love
it's not
like did you even catch that? It's like with Anakin. It's like, dude, are you really listening? Because he's like, well, secret to life. That's something you and I are gonna figure out. But it's like, if I were Anakin, I would have been like, whoa, hold on, back up.
You said
exactly the whole reason why we're doing this. Like, I just pushed that man out a window. Well, Palpatine kind of did that, but. Yeah. But it's like, I just essentially assisted in it, if not
homicide.
Killing, or at least he would have been at least attempted murder, right? It's like, right. Dude, back up. But it's so funny because Anakin just kind of blows right there, like, no. The whole reason why you started down this path in the first place is because you were promised this whole secret to either, creating life or saving life or any of this other stuff. And for him to just, like, he didn't even wait. He didn't even pretend. He was like, well, the secret, that's you and I are going to have to work on that. But it's like, no. No killing all of the people you want me to kill. No younglings are going to die. We're going to sit down. We're going to hash this out.
Like, crack up one of your little Sith libraries and let's get these holocrons.
Exactly. It's like, yep, we're going to do this. Or
start turning the pages.
Now I'm not going to arrest you for that. Now I'm going to sue you for, some sort of a thing. David says, is there anyone who had perfect balance with the Force? I mean, I guess the closest would probably be Yoda. Unless, of course, you want to count the father in that, like the Mordor or Mortis. Mordor, I think it's Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
If you count that, he probably is the one because the son and the daughter were light and dark, and he was kind of like pure light.
Well, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong. As long as you stay on the light side, you're balanced.
You are, and that's why she was cool.
Like Qui-Gon, so I mean, you could say basically Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Luke.
Yeah.
Well, Luke did. Well, no. He did dip a little bit, but he did come back.
He had a moment.
He had a moment.
So if you're saying perfectly, then you'd have to go for people that,
never.
And I think Qui-Gon even had a little. I mean, it was never pointed out in the films, obviously, if you're just going by that, but.
I would say at least Obi-Wan and Yoda.
Yeah.
Because they were pretty much stalwarts as, in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I think you're right, actually. I mean, if you really want to be at least Lucas type technical, you would say that anybody that never really fell to the dark side would be there. Now that doesn't.
I can't even say that really because Anakin, even though he died, when he was redeemed, he went back to the light. He was able to become a Force ghost. So I mean, I don't even think it even matters if you went to the dark side as long as you didn't stay there. That's just the only thing that matters.
Yeah, that's it. Where it destroyed you and all that
Once
stuff.
again, much like it's kind of like, much like salvation for those who again subscribe to the Christian belief. Once you're redeemed, I mean, you're saved.
Yep. So, I mean, you just have to basically look at a lot of these characters and just look at, okay, where did they begin? Where are they going? Because you also have to look at intent, too, right? I mean, I wouldn't say somebody was perfectly keeping it if they were keeping it for reasons that, because then they're not mentally balanced, right? If they're, maybe they have a little dark side in there, well, I'm doing this light side thing because whatever. I think you could get into a little trouble there. There's a few expanded universe characters that started to more or less represent that. But, I mean, yeah, generally speaking, I definitely think that it's interesting to rewatch the prequels and the original trilogy with that in mind. Like I said, you can't really watch the sequels because they sort of threw that out the window. They basically went against that. So I don't know. But yeah, I mean it's a fun. This is actually kind of a fun little thing. Yeah. Actually, tomorrow's is too, because tomorrow night's show is going to be actually kind of almost like a continuation of this discussion. It's basically, were the Jedi wrong about the dark side? And again, it's another one that comes to us from Screen Rant. So, they're a big source of a lot of the topics that we talk about. Sometimes we actually, sometimes when we do those countdown shows, we'll look at theirs and go, all right, let's see if we agree with these guys. I almost want to be in touch with them or something. I guess they'd probably want a few more viewers than we usually get live for. Hey, we'll sponsor something that you're doing or whatever. But, I mean, again, Screen Rant, the partnership makes sense. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
But yeah, I think that tomorrow's discussion about the Jedi possibly being wrong about the dark side, we'll see where that takes us tomorrow. And then, of course, next week, we'll probably try to start delving into some of these D23 announcements, see if anything's there, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm trying to remember, because a lot of times, it's like even our trailer reactions are getting hit lately. Didn't we just turn the sound down on the last one or something, or maybe added like barely audible in order so the algorithm wouldn't catch it? We did something.
We only showed a short part of it, and then we just reacted.
Oh, yeah, we didn't have it. That's right. We didn't have it up with us and react to it. We kind of showed a little bit of it, then cut back to us and a little more, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It's
we'll
wild
see
how they do that.
Yeah,
But, yep.
maybe, the live reaction thing is cool, but I don't know. Maybe we'll just watch the Skeleton Crew trailer and talk about it. I don't know, maybe that's something that what we do next Sunday. We just call it the D23 update or something. Producing on the fly, everybody. That's what we do here. you actually get to watch us, take care of business. But join us tomorrow night, again, 8 o'clock. We'll be live. More than likely. Always have to throw that in there. And we're going to talk about, like I said, the Jedi possibly being wrong about the dark side. It should actually be a pretty good discussion. All right, so with that, I think that's going to do it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, of course. Comment in the comment section. We got a lot of good comments from the last episode that we did, so that was cool. That was fun to go back and forth with some people. Join our Discord. If you see me playing Call of Duty in there, go ahead and hook up if you got an Xbox or PlayStation. So until tomorrow, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Darryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.